Welcome to Meet the Press Now. It is Election Day in America. I am Kristen Welker at NBC News headquarters in New York, and voters are voting across the country, casting their ballots with the first polls set to close in less than 3 hours. In-person voting kicking off bright and early in Dixville Notch, New Hampshire, as is tradition, with the town's 6 registered voters casting their ballots at midnight. The results? A tie, folks. A small example of just how close this presidential race could be. Today, both Vice President Harris and former President Trump are off the campaign trail after making their final pitches to battleground voters overnight. Mr. Trump spending Election Day in his home state of Florida, where he and his wife Melania voted earlier today. The former president briefly speaking to reporters and telling our own Garrett Haake that he has no regrets about his campaign.
But regrets, you always have regrets. I can't think of any, to be honest, to use her expression. I can't think of any. I ran a great campaign. I think it was maybe the best of the 3. We did great in the first one. We did much better in the second one, but something happened. And this was the best. I would say this was the best campaign we ran.
Now, it comes after Mr. Trump closed his campaign in Grand Rapids, Michigan, the same place he finished his campaign in 2016 and 2020. Last night, mixing optimism with unsubstantiated claims about voting machines, along with familiar attacks on his opponents.
With your vote tomorrow, we can fix every single problem our country faces and lead America, indeed the world, to new heights of glory. Look, the ball's in our hand. All we have to do is get out the vote tomorrow. You get out the vote, they can't do anything about it, we win. If we show up, they can't win. They can't. They mathematically can't win because they're so far behind. I'm not running against Kamala. I'm running against an evil Democrat system. These are evil people.
Meanwhile, Vice President Harris was in Philadelphia last night urging voters to turn the page on the Trump era and nodding to the city's most famous underdog.
Here at these famous steps, a tribute to those who start as the underdog and climb to victory. We have an opportunity in this election to finally turn the page on a decade of politics that has been driven by fear and division. However, the race ain't over yet. And we must finish strong, and this could be one of the closest races in history.
And just moments ago, the vice president hopping on the phone with voters during an unscheduled visit to a Democratic phone bank at DNC headquarters. She will spend tonight at her election headquarters at her alma mater, Howard University, this morning talking to Georgia Radio about the significance of that location.
The first office I ever ran for was freshman class representative at Howard University. And to go back tonight to Howard University, my beloved alma mater, and be able to hopefully, recognize this day for what it is really, it's full circle for me. And, if elected, I'll be the first HBCU president.
It is now a waiting game, folks, to see what voters will decide, not just in the presidential election, but also which party will control Congress, as well as closely watched ballot measures, including abortion on the ballot in 10 different states. And with voters at times braving very long lines to exercise their right to vote, here's what some voters told NBC News about why they turned out today.
To have my voice heard and let it be known that I am an American. If I stayed home, that's just a vote I'm throwing away.
I think the country really is at stake. I think the divisive politics in the country at this time is really a detriment to our country.
I kind of didn't want to vote for either, but I'm like, we need change. I just feel like everything's getting so expensive.
I just took my time and looked at each candidate, and not only for the upper echelon, like the president, but also, the district leaders and everything like that.
I definitely feel a weight lifted now that I've done it, so I'm just anxious to see the results.
Always so great to hear from the voters. First polls close at 7 p.m. Eastern time, so if you're watching us right now, there is still time to go out and vote. All throughout the hour, we'll be checking with our team of NBC News reporters who are on the ground, fanned out across the country, following the candidates and speaking to voters at polling places in the biggest battlegrounds. And starting us off, Dasha Burns following Donald Trump in West Palm Beach, Florida. Gabe Gutierrez is with Kamala Harris at Howard University, Washington, D.C. In the battleground states, Julie Tsirkin in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Blaine Alexander in Fulton County, Georgia, Shaq Brewster in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and Priscilla Thompson in Surprise, Arizona. Thank you all for starting us off. Dasha, I am going to start with you. We heard what former President Trump had to say. He said he thinks it's the best campaign he's ever run. What's the mood inside the campaign, Dasha?
Hey, Kristen, cautious optimism is the phrase buzzing around Trump staffers and allies. The former president himself said multiple times yesterday he believes that he has a 95% chance of winning. Of course, we've seen the polls. That is overshooting it by quite a lot, but it is an incredibly tight race. I also just heard from a campaign advisor who was on the plane with the former president yesterday, giving a bit of color of the mood on that plane after his final rally of his near decade as a candidate. This source telling me that the former president got a, quote, second wind, even though this was middle of the night, 3 in the morning, landing here at 6 a.m. in Palm Beach. She said he was boisterous on the plane. He was having conversations the entire time with folks on the plane, and that he had something quippy and personal to say to each of the close members of his campaign staff. They also told me that backstage before the rally, the staff and the family were really emotional, almost getting teary-eyed while telling me about that. And that really meant a lot to former President Trump to have his children there with him on that final day of campaigning as well, Kristen.
Yeah, extraordinary to think of how much time he has been on the campaign trail, Dasha, that's for sure. So take me inside their strategy. What do they see as their best path to victory? And can he get to the White House without winning Pennsylvania?
It's an excellent question. Pennsylvania is that gold prize. The thing tonight that they're watching for most closely is really North Carolina and Georgia, because we do think we'll get those results a little faster than we will get those blue wall states coming through. And boy, does he need North Carolina. He won it both in 2016 and 2020, and he needs it again. Otherwise, the math gets a little bit dicey. He does have other paths besides Pennsylvania if he isn't able to win that. But of course, that's the one that both Harris and Trump has visited most often, most electoral votes, and it's been the thing to put a lot of presidents over the edge, Kristen.
Yeah, Democrat hasn't won there since 2008. We could actually get results for North Carolina to right, Dasha, and you set the stakes very well for how important that state is. Thank you so much, Gabe Gutierrez. Let's head over to you. Well, we heard the vice president in that interview earlier today. How is she spending her day? What's the mood inside her campaign?
Hi there, Kristen. Well, we are here at Howard University, as you mentioned, and as you said, this has huge significance for Vice President Harris, her alma mater, of course. Behind me, the stage is being set. You might be able to hear the sound check. Music's about to kick in here, but this is so significant for her, not just because it's the alma mater, but back in 2019, Kristen, she also announced her presidential bid back then as well. Now, the mood inside the Harris campaign, and to borrow a phrase from Dasha, look, the Harris campaign is also cautiously optimistic. That's something that you often hear from campaigns, not trying to sound too jubilant at this point. But we have been hearing from Vice President Harris over the last several days, really during her swing throughout Pennsylvania yesterday, that the momentum, they feel the momentum is on their side. And that's something we've been hearing more and more in these last several hours, although the campaign does feel that this is still extremely close around those 7 battleground states. Still, they feel more optimistic about what they're seeing in Georgia, what they're seeing in North Carolina, and specifically the turnout in North Carolina. They feel that because more than 50% of the early turnout so far has been women, they feel, in their view, that that is tracking towards them. But as Dasha was saying, the most obvious path for Vice President Harris is, of course, those blue wall states, but they feel they are competing right now in razor-thin margins in all 7 of the battlegrounds, Kristen.
Well, Gabe, speaking of those blue wall states, a Michigan Democrat told me they are nauseously optimistic. So gives you a sense of how close this race is.
Nauseously, yes.
Exactly.
We're hearing that a lot, too.
Yeah, it's how close this race is. Let's talk about African-American men in all of this, because we know that there has been a concern that she hasn't been getting the numbers that she needs with African-American men, a critical part of the Biden coalition. For example, we know former President Barack Obama was out trying to energize them. She rolled out an agenda specifically for black men. How do they feel as though their get out the vote efforts are panning out today?
Well, look, the campaign does feel it's going extremely well. You just saw Vice President Harris just a few moments ago at the DNC for that photo op at that phone bank. Now, campaign officials are trying to brush off those stories that enthusiasm is low among young black men. They're brushing them off as sort of overblown. But you can't deny, Kristen, that the campaign has been focusing on that demographic quite a bit over the last several weeks. Former President Obama also voicing that concern in one of those stops. And look, for First Lady Michelle Obama was also out making that case. So they have been going towards that demographic quite a bit, trying to get them out to the polls in these last several days. They feel that it has been working. They're very encouraged by the early turnout numbers, but not just black men. We saw yesterday they're really going after Puerto Ricans in places like Pennsylvania. They think that that could be the key in order to win such an important blue wall state, Pennsylvania, Kristen.
Well, Gabe, I know we've all got a long night ahead. Thank you so much for your reporting on the ground there from outside of Howard University. Julie Tsirkin, let me turn to you now. You are in Pittsburgh and the all-important battleground state of Pennsylvania. I just spoke to an election official in the Philadelphia area who said that there was robust turnout there. What are you hearing? What are voters telling you today?
Kristen, robust turnout here as well. Election officials here, state representatives I talked to a couple of minutes ago telling me that they have surpassed both mail-in ballot numbers and, of course, the people who are showing up at the polls, not only where I am right now in northwest suburbs of Pittsburgh, but really throughout the entirety of Allegheny County, which is really a blue island surrounded by red counties that have trended even more red over the last couple of elections. I spoke to one Democratic official here familiar with how this area operates and works, and he told me that in order for Harris to win Pennsylvania, he's got to outperform the way Biden did in Allegheny County. He got 59%. They say Harris needs to meet that or exceed it. If she gets anything under 55%, around the number that Hillary Clinton got in 2016, she's in trouble in the state. I talked to a lot of voters as well. In a swingy state, you get swingy opinions. Take a listen to the key demographic for both parties, which is suburban women.
I voted straight Democrat, which I've pretty much always done. I'm just afraid of what would happen if Trump got in.
I feel his way is going to be really crazy, and I just would fear not only for my democracy, but I'm old, my children, my grandchildren, my grandchildren's children, and that's how I really looked at it. It was really important.
Voted straight Democrat.
Yeah,
I'm a lifelong Republican.
Because I feel that although she doesn't represent all my values, she represents more of them than the Republicans do right now. And I'm very concerned about the split in the Republican Party. And until they fix that, I can't consider myself a true Republican anymore.
Now, that woman you heard from, her name is Diane. She's 65 years old. She told me she, for example, is anti-abortion, but that issue is so important for her because she believes in choice. That is something we've heard often here. We, of course, also heard from Trump voters, including a 19-year-old first-time voter who decided to vote for the former president.
Just fascinating, Julie Tsirkin. Fantastic interviews. Great reporting on the ground there. Thank you. Blaine Alexander, let me turn to you. It's so great to have you back just in time for Election Day. You're there in Fulton County. Georgia's Secretary of State office says more than half of all active voters in the state cast their ballots early. So talk about turnout today, and welcome back, my friend.
Thank you so much. Good to be back with you. And got a little bit going on here in Georgia. So, yes, absolutely. We're talking about more than half of the registered voters here in the state had already cast a ballot by the time polls opened this morning. And so that really does kind of have an impact on Election Day. Why is that? Because 4 million people, more than 4 million people had already cast their ballot. I've got to say, Kristen, that among our team, we have visited more than a dozen polling locations throughout the day across metro Atlanta. We have not seen any lines. I've talked to people people, and they said that the wait time has ranged from about 15, 20 minutes early this morning to less than 5 minutes. That's really what we're hearing from people across the state, and that is a large reflection of what we saw, that record-breaking early voting turnout. Now, as for the ballots we've seen cast today, the Secretary of State about an hour or so ago said that they've had more than 700,000 people just today come out and cast those ballots. So what does that mean in terms of how the state may go? Well, I spoke with one senior Democrat official here in the state, and they say that they're watching two things: who is voting and where people are voting. Now, because of that early vote turnout, they're getting a lot of that. A lot of those eyes, as we've talked about, has been focused on black voters. Here in Georgia, the early vote turnout, more than 1 million black voters have cast their ballot. That is a state record. That's a very large number, and that's something that they're watching very closely. The question now, of course, is who's coming out today. The other thing, Kristen, that I think is important to point out is when we will start to see results. You'll remember, of course, back in 2020, Georgia wasn't called for more than a week after Election Day. Well, this time around, state law mandates that all counties have to start tabulating those early votes and many of the absentee ballots, most of the absentee ballots, by 8 p.m., an hour after polls close. So that means that we should see a good majority of those votes start to be tabulated very quickly tonight. Kristen.
Just fascinating stuff from the ground there in Georgia. Blaine, thank you so much. Great to see you. Shaq, let me turn to you now in all-important Milwaukee. What are voters telling you there? Blaine is saying that the wait time not as long as you might anticipate there, likely because there were so many early votes. What are you seeing in Milwaukee?
Well, Kristen, despite the rain that you may see and hear around me, it's been a steady flow of people going at this polling location. The clerk actually told me this morning there was a line of people that went on about an hour long, so that shows some of the enthusiasm that you have here. One of my favorite conversations was a voter who said he was undecided until this morning. He decided to take 2 laps around this park here, and that's when he ultimately made a decision. He went to back Vice President Kamala Harris, but I want you to listen to some of the other conversations I had with folks today. Are you willing to share who you supported in this election?
Sure. Donald Trump.
Donald Trump. Why Donald Trump?
You know, I just think we need a change, and I think that, you know, trying to grow in my career and things like that, some of the things that I feel that he can set forth and that he had in the past could be done again.
Donald J. Trump, J.D. Vance, absolutely.
Why those two?
The Democrats have, I want to say, overpromised and underdelivered the black community for decades, and I'm sick and tired of it, and I want to see a change.
We need to preserve and restore certain democratic freedoms. I really want to see us moving forward and not going backwards. To me, Harris was the clear choice to keep things free in the U.S.
Now, as you saw in some other states, there was also a high number of early vote in Wisconsin. The problem is that early vote was just able to start getting processed today, so that may lead to some delays once we get in the reporting phase later this evening, Kristen.
Well, it's always, again, just so fascinating to hear from the voters. It is their day. Shaq, Brewster, thank you for bringing us those great interviews. Priscilla, you're out in Arizona, still relatively early out west, but how has voter turnout been there so far?
Yeah, Kristen, we just got an update from Maricopa County saying that nearly 150,000 voters have checked in across the county today. That's adding to the more than 2 million who voted early. And I want to just give you a look inside of a voter's shoes. They are walking up and they are getting Harris supporters offering them voter guides. There are Trump supporters here also offering their voter guides. So trying to capture what any voters who may be undecided before they hit this point, and then they are walking in all on their own. There are about 80 people in line right now. We've been out here talking to a lot of these voters, and I want to play a little bit of some of what we're hearing. Take a listen.
People are dying. Women that's can't carry a child, needing to have this child taken out, and you're telling me that this woman has to die because the doctors are scared, which is totally understandable. That's horrible to me. And that's putting everybody's life in risk.
Our economy, our country is going bankrupt. And if we vote democratically, we are going to be in a worse situation than we are now. They don't care about the borders. They don't care about the American people.
And a ballot measure protecting the right to abortion is on the ballot here. So we've heard a lot of passion from Democrats who are turning out on that issue, but also Republicans talking about immigration and the economy and just that they believe Donald Trump will take the country in the right direction. So we will see how it all turns out here in many more hours when polls close here very late, 10 p.m. Eastern time tonight. Kristen.
Fascinating interviews, and so important to remind our viewers that there is an abortion ballot measure. It will be very interesting to see how that impacts turnout and the ultimate results. Priscilla Thompson, great stuff. Thank you from Battleground, Arizona, and thanks to our entire team for an incredible start. We have got much more Election Day coverage to get to coming up. I'll talk to California's senator and a longtime ally to Vice President Harris about the state of the presidential race and the fight for Senate control. Senator Laphonza Butler joins me next, live from the Harris campaign's election headquarters. Plus, stay tuned for even more special election night coverage straight ahead. It all kicks off at 5 p.m. Eastern with live analysis as the very first exit polls start coming in right here on NBC News Now. You're watching a very special Election Day edition of Meet the Press Now. We'll be right back. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back. As we mentioned, Vice President Harris and former President Trump have wrapped up their final battleground blitz, and now the wait for results begins. Either candidate could make history tonight. If elected, Vice President Harris could become the first female president of the United States, while former President Trump would be just the second president to win non-consecutive terms. Joining me now from the Harris headquarters is Democratic Senator from California and Harris campaign co-chair Laphonza Butler. Senator Butler, thanks so much for joining us on Election Day. We really appreciate it.
Glad to be here. Thanks so much.
So take us inside the campaign. What is the mood? An official in Michigan described it as nauseously optimistic to me. How are you feeling?
Look, I don't know that I was nauseously optimistic. What we know is that we have made a high-quality case to the American people in a very short period of time. We are feeling like voters understand what is the opportunity in front of us tonight to write the next chapter of the great American story, and I think they're prepared to do their part. And so we are optimistic. We feel good. We feel good about the effort that we've put in, and now it's in the hands of the American people.
It is the voters' day. Let me ask you this. Vice President Harris has spent really these final weeks of her campaign trying to appeal to moderate voters. She's been campaigning, of course, with former Congresswoman Liz Cheney. She's been really touting a message of democracy, arguing that former President Trump is a threat to the democracy. She has been talking about other issues like reproductive rights and the economy. But again, a lot of the focus has been on the democracy. Do you think that was a mistake? Is that the best issue to turn out the base and to energize voters to go to the polls today?
Look, as you noted, Kristen, the vice president has been, really speaking to all voters, and the communication about the sacredness of our democracy really speaks to the patriotic spirit that we know the American people have. We love this country. We want to protect this democracy for future generations. And I think the vice president is right and has made a very strong case about the value of our democracy and what we owe to the next generations. And we've got to be speaking to that. Young voters matter. It will matter in this election. There's so many people who've come before us, who have fought for the right to vote, who have protected this democracy on battlefields across the world. And so I think that she is making a strong case about the greatness of America and and the opportunity that we have in front of us to save it, to preserve it, and to hand it over to future generations, this next generation of leadership.
There had been some concern that African-American men were not supporting her the same numbers that they supported President Biden, former President Barack Obama. Do you think that the campaign that Harris surrogates have done enough leading into this election day to energize African-American men around her?
Kristen, let me be the first to say thank you to every African-American man that has already cast their ballot and who is going to be going to cast their ballot tonight. not only are they supporting Vice President Harris, but they support the vice president and Democrats traditionally second only to Black women. And so I want to salute their commitment to preserving this country and this democracy, for fighting for a government that will work for everyone. And I think the vice president has introduced policies for the first time in history in the presidential campaign that speaks directly to them. And I think that we will see tonight the power of Black men and frankly the role that they've always played in presidential elections.
What do you make of former President Trump's closing argument? He has spoken about issues like the economy and immigration, but there's also been a lot of rhetoric. Some would call it dark rhetoric. In some cases, he even invoked violence. What do you make of that closing message?
Look, it's the same old tired message. For the last 9 years, the American people have been listening to Donald Trump denigrate women and people with disabilities. We have, heard his, cries of antagonism and dismissal of people who may think differently than him. We've heard his whining, frankly, about things that may not go his way, and we're done with it. The vice president has made this point 23 times in the last week. The American people are done with his tired old story. And if that's the best argument that he's got to close, then I think the choice before the American people tonight is a very clear one.
Senator, what are the plans within the Harris campaign if former President Trump prematurely declares victory tonight, as he did in 2020?
Look, I think what we are trying to do is let the voices of the American people be heard through their vote. We are prepared to be patient. We are prepared to defend and protect the rights of every American to have their vote counted and to have their voice heard. We know that the former president has been laying the groundwork to do exactly what you just said, to declare early victory, to create chaos and confusion. But that's the only tool he's got. And so rest assured, we have a top-notch legal team, voter protection attorneys all over the country with hotlines that are ready to go for voters to call into. Go to iwillvote.com and find all of the information that you need. But we are, again, prepared to be patient and ensure that every voice, every vote of the American people is cast and counted.
All right, Senator Butler, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Kristen.
Coming up next, you are looking at live pictures of Trump headquarters in West Palm Beach, Florida. We'll get the view from a top Trump campaign official next, amid new concerns from Trump allies about the campaign's ground game. We'll delve into all of that. You're watching a very special edition, Election Day, right here on News Now. Meet the Press Now. Welcome back. We just heard from the Harris campaign headquarters. Let's now turn to the Trump campaign. Joining me now is Trump campaign press secretary Karoline Leavitt. Karoline, thanks so much for being here on Election Day. I know it's a busy time for all of you.
Thanks for having us, Kristen. We appreciate it.
Well, we really appreciate your being here. Let's dive right in. So all of the campaign stops are now over. Give me the mood inside the Trump campaign, the mood for former President Trump as you all await results.
The mood is very optimistic here at the Trump campaign headquarters. We are cautiously confident that President Trump is going to win this election tonight. When we've been looking at the early voting data over the past couple of weeks during this early voting period, Republicans have been outpacing Democrats in many of the key battleground states. And what we're hearing across the country today is that turnout is exceptionally high, especially in rural areas. So all signs point to President Trump supporters showing up at the polls, and we're just continuing to encourage people throughout the day to get out and to vote and to stay in line if you are in line. We understand some of the lines in these key battleground counties and states can be particularly long today, but we're encouraging everyone to stay in line to cast their ballot for President Trump.
Well, let me ask you something about what Charlie Kirk said. He, of course, is a Trump supporter. Part of the ground game is being conducted by Charlie Kirk, Turning Points USA. Here's what he tweeted earlier today. He said, turnout is mixed and not where we want it to be. We need more people to vote. We can't let turnout flatline. What do you make of that, Karoline? Does that concern you? Does it concern the former president?
No, as I said earlier, we are hearing that turnout is high, particularly in rural America. Turnout is low in urban America. But again, as Charlie, I think, was trying to say with that tweet, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but look, we are not taking anything for granted. And that's why we have been doing GOT efforts here at the Trump campaign headquarters, continuing to call voters and encourage them to get out the polls. We believe in our ground game. We have spent months training hundreds of thousands of volunteers across the country who are responsible for turning out low propensity voters in their respective communities. So we trust our ground game. We trust our people on the ground, and we're continuing to work to get voters out to the polls. So again, we are cautiously confident that as long as President Trump's supporters continue to show up, as we have seen them do throughout the morning and the early afternoon today, then we're going to win tonight.
Well, you're right. It's all going to come down to those low propensity voters. I know there has been so much focus on making sure they do turn out to vote. I have been talking to some allies of the former president who are somewhat concerned that the ground game was outsourced to some extent. Do they have reason to be concerned? We're getting a lot of stats coming in from the Biden campaign. For example, they say they're knocking on 2 million doors per minute in Pennsylvania. How confident are you in the ground game?
We are 100% confident in our ground game. We have truly put together the most robust, data-driven, and people-powered ground game that we believe in American politics. That will be proven again when President Trump hopefully declares victory. But there was a lot of criticism and concern because we changed some things from past years. And in politics, when you change up the game, then sometimes there's criticism from the outside. But in this building, we believe in the ground game that we have put together. We have exceptional data experts who are looking at the numbers coming in. And again, all of the early voting trends and also the voter registration trends that we have seen over the past several weeks in Pennsylvania, for instance, where we were out registering, Republicans were out registering Democrats by a margin of 2-1. In Arizona, Georgia, North Carolina, where Republicans were outpacing Democrats, not just with voter registration, but also early voter turnout. I think that's a testament to our ground game. We just have to finish the job today.
And I should correct myself. It's 3 million total. They were touting 2,000 per minute over the weekend. So no regrets about outsourcing part of the ground game, Karoline?
Absolutely not. We believe in our team, and we believe in the hundreds of thousands of people who have signed up to be volunteers for President Trump, who we have given low-impact tasks to that we believe will make a big difference today in turning out their fellow Americans to the polls.
Let me just ask you about some of the rhetoric that we've heard from former President Trump on the campaign trail. Some of his supporters feel as though he hasn't spent enough time focusing on the economy and immigration and instead has focused too much time on, at times, dark rhetoric, talking about training guns, for example, on Congresswoman Liz Cheney. How do you respond to some of that criticism and concern from inside your own orbit?
Well, let me just correct the record or set it straight, at least, when it comes to the Liz Cheney comment. President Trump was referring to how politicians like Liz Cheney sit in Washington, D.C. and make decisions that send America's sons and daughters over to fight in wars, but have never served in combat themselves. That was the greater context of that discussion. And frankly, I think a lot of Americans, Democrats and Republicans, agree with him on that. When it comes to the alleged dark rhetoric, he's talking about the reality in this country right now. More than 70% of the country feels that we are moving in the wrong direction. When you look at our border, when you look at the economy, prices are still 25% higher. Americans are falling behind. There's a lot of pessimism across the country. People want an optimistic leader, and President Trump is offering that optimistic vision to make America affordable, safe, and strong again.
Karoline, one more question. Can you guarantee that former President Trump will not declare victory before the votes have been cast, before this election has been called?
President Trump will be watching the votes tonight, and he will address his supporters at the appropriate time.
But can you guarantee he won't declare victory prematurely?
I don't think that will happen. I will leave it to him, and I believe that he's going to declare victory and give a speech to his supporters, again, at the appropriate time.
All right, Karoline Leavitt, thank you again for being here on Election Day. We really appreciate your time and perspective.
Thanks, Kristen.
Still to come, an extraordinary campaign for president comes to a close, and the future of the White House and Congress are both on the line. We have much more to get to. You're watching a very special edition of Meet the Press Now. Stay with us.
what matters to me most is autonomy over my own body, the ability to make choices for myself and my family.
I think the border is one of my biggest concerns because I'm an immigrant, but I came here legally. And I think that's the way to go, not illegally.
I'm gay and I'm married, and I'm very concerned for my rights as a married gay man.
Everything is crazy expensive, and I just want to be able to provide for my family and get groceries easily.
Welcome back. As we've mentioned, the road to 270 all comes down to just a handful of states. Both Harris and Trump have spent a significant amount of time and money on the ground in those critical states, including the blue wall states of Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, as well as Georgia and North Carolina. Some of the first battleground states will start to see those election results roll in just a few hours. Joining me now, we have got a supersized Election Day panel, former Democratic Senator from North Dakota and a CNBC contributor, Heidi Heitkamp, Democratic pollster and an NBC News political analyst, Cornell Belcher, Republican strategist and a Meet the Press contributor, Sarah Fagan, and former Director of Strategic Communications for the Trump 2020 campaign, Mark Lotter. Thanks to all of you for starting us off. Supersized indeed. Cornell, I have to start with you because if you look at the polls, historically speaking, this is one of the closest races in modern American history. What do you make of these polls?
Stop looking at the polls, right? Get off the poller coaster, and I'm the pollster, right? The polls are going to be all over the place. Look, I remember working for a guy by the name of Barack Obama in 2012 when it was a close race, right? An election night going in, our Republican friends said Mitt Romney's going to beat you, right? 2016, a close race. 2020, a close race. It all depends on who's turning out. Yeah. It all depends on the shape of the electorate. And I can tell you right now, I don't think that this electorate, when you look at the enthusiasm among women voters and what in early vote in some of these states, you do see a surge of women. You see a surge of women. I think this electorate is going to be a couple points even more female than the 2020 electorate. So, quite frankly, we may be driving a story or a narrative about it being close, but we don't know.
Yeah. Senator Heitkamp, is this going to be a race that comes down to the gender gap at the end of the day?
Absolutely. I don't know how you could look at it any other way. If she wins tonight, she's going to win on the back of women, particularly older women, 65 and older. That's a demographic Democrats have not done well with. They're doing very well in these polls. Why is that important? They're reliable voters. They go out and vote. And I think there are so many women today throughout the country who are making a statement. And maybe it's not loud, but it is going to be on their votes that she wins if she wins tonight.
Sarah, pick up on that point. And in talking to my Trump campaign sources, they are focused on getting out voters who are low propensity voters. That's really where their focus has been. But as Senator Heitkamp is saying, there so far does seem to be some signs, I should say, of robust turnout among women who are.
Well, certainly they voted early at higher numbers. I mean, that we know. But what matters now is what happens today. And, you know, people talk oftentimes about a gender gap. But sometimes a gender gap can be a good thing. If you're Donald Trump and you're driving out men, and particularly younger men who are low propensity, that could be very positive for him tonight.
Mark, have they done enough to get out those low propensity voters? I was speaking to someone overnight who was deeply concerned that a lot of the ground game for the Trump campaign has been outsourced, quite frankly, and saying you have Kamala Harris literally knocking on doors herself, and there's not that same on-the-ground organization, this ally was saying, as they perceive to be.
Yeah, so I actually work with an organization that is one of the main organizations doing the ground game. Yep. And much like the organization I work for, the American First Policy Institute, you don't hear about us unless we want you to. They are doing that work. They have turned out actually more voters who did not vote in 2020 than the margin of victory that Joe Biden had in each of the battleground states in 2020. They've turned out those folks. And then when you add on the voter registration that we've talked about for a lot here in the battleground states, the early vote turnout, their deficit in urban voters and female voters that we've talked about. And now today I'm actually seeing reports coming out of people close to the campaign that said Democrat turnout, or at least turnout in Democrat counties around Washington, D.C., in Virginia, down 20%. They're seeing similar trends in some blue wall areas of Arizona, Nevada, and Pennsylvania. and that could be very key. They've got time to close it. Polls haven't closed, but they're right now down 20%.
Let me make a bet right now that Democrat turnout will not be down 20%. And when at the end of the counting, when all the counts are done, Democrat turnout will not be down 20 points.
I don't think it'll be down 20%, but I don't think it'll be down equal.
Well, I think it's tough to compare apples. It's not apples to apples when you're looking at early vote in a pandemic versus what we actually see in polling, where a lot of voters go back to the traditional ways of voting on election day. I mean, I went out and voted in D.C. today at the polls before I got on the plane and came here to be with you. So I think sometimes we can read too much into the early voting because we want to know so much.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the other piece of this, which is the closing arguments, Sarah Fagan, that we have heard from each of these candidates. Former President Trump, yes, talking about immigration and talking about the economy, but also talking about a whole host of other issues, including suggesting that if he loses, that there has been cheating again. What do you make of his closing argument? Do you think he said and did what he needed to do in these closing days?
Well, I think if you look at his advertising, his closing ads, they've been phenomenal. I mean, his ads, they're very uplifting. They're positive. They show his strength. They show him with the fight. And so people who aren't watching the news as much as we all do, they're seeing a pretty good message out of him. I think certainly sometimes at the podium he makes comments that are not helpful to him. They're not helpful to the country. And when he does that, he risks those kind of few remaining undecided voters that are paying attention. So it's a little bit of I mean, I think he's done some really good closing arguments, but he steps on his message too much.
Mark, so many Republicans with whom I speak say that they're surprised, actually, that Nikki Haley hasn't been out on the campaign trail with him, that she was willing to go. She wrote an op-ed. She's endorsed him. She did everything she sort of needed to do, and yet he didn't have her out on the campaign trail. And she got a lot of votes in the primary. Do you think that's a mistake?
I don't think so, because, I mean, anybody who followed Nikki Haley, maybe supported Nikki Haley, you know that she came out, she endorsed the president, she wrote an op-ed, she has said positive things in media interviews about it. So whether you're standing on a campaign stage or not, and I think, actually, to Sarah's point, it's those closing messages on the advertising. The people who aren't watching cable and broadcast news, they're the ones who are still undecided and on the fence. If you're watching all of these programs, you've probably made up all your mind already.
Guess what? The 20 to 35-year-old bros, they're not watching your television advertising either. And so your message to them has to be really refined. And Joe Rogan coming out as late as what he did, I think, doesn't really help them. And these are low-propensity voters that he's trying to target. But if you look at Trump's closing argument, he keeps stepping on his most important message, which is we're on the wrong track, we could fix it, the signs are right. But she gives a message of hope and the future, and we aren't going back. And I think that's valuable.
Senator, let me follow up with you on that, because there is the counterpoint to that, which is she had a positive message. She also spent a lot of time talking about democracy, calling Trump a fascist. Do you think in recent weeks she should have put more focus on reproductive rights and the economy and sort of focused on those two issues that seem to be some of the most motivated?
Yeah, I think the media focused a lot on General Kelly. Let's start where it started. General Kelly made this statement. Then the questions were asked, do you agree with General Kelly? General Kelly, famously the chief of staff for Donald Trump. And so this occupied a lot of space. But her message has been really consistent on abortion. And I think closing on abortion, I've always said that. Close on abortion, close on freedom, close on, we're not going back to the chaos of those 4 years, and I think she wins.
Cornell, what do you make of her closing argument?
I think that we make too much of the economy. And as long as I've been in politics,
even though it's the number one,
it's always the number one issue, right? I work. You think it was what would you think was the number one issue in 2008?
The economy.
What you think was the number one issue in 2012? And by the way, Romney had a better advantage on the economy than Obama did. He or she who defines the debate, even my Republican friends will agree with this because it's just politics 101. He or she defines the debate, wins the debate. So she's leaning into what she wants the closing debate to be about. She wants it to be about reproductive rights. She wants it to be about freedom. She wants it to be about democracy. He wants it to be about the border and a bad economy. So, of course, she's leaning into it. That's just good campaigning.
All right, folks, we are about 2 hours away from the polls starting to close. Mark Lotter, what are you going to be watching for tonight? What do you think are going to be the early signs of where this race is headed?
North Carolina and Georgia, they both report early. And then when you throw on Arizona, where he's consistently leading in the polls, I actually think that we are going to have this race called on Wisconsin well before Pennsylvania starts counting the votes.
So you think we could get a call tonight, or you mean maybe sometime
like
tomorrow?
3:30 in the morning.
Okay.
Tomorrow,
all right.
yes.
So I'm watching really two things.
Yes.
First, what share of the vote does Donald Trump get among the early vote? Does he outperform his share from 2020? And the second thing is, what is the percentage among African-American men for Donald Trump in some of those high black counties in North Carolina and Georgia? Does he outperform certainly what he did in 2020, but even maybe some of the polling? And if those things happen, that will be a very good night for the former president.
And conversely, does she underperform?
Sure. And yes.
Because they've spent so much time trying to energize African-American male voters in particular. We saw that with former President Obama. Cornell, will you be watching for that, and what else?
This black males breaking for Donald Trump is the red wave of 2024. It's absurd, and we'll come back and we'll have this conversation at the next poll. What I'll be watching for is turnout. Again, it's all about turnout. If you tell me at the end of the night is Milwaukee, 3 or 4 points behind the overall state, or is it 10 points behind the overall state? If it's 10 points behind the overall state, she's going to lose Wisconsin. If it's 2 or 3 points behind the overall state, because again, urban areas, she's going to win Wisconsin. The same thing is true of Philadelphia, and the same thing is true of Pittsburgh. I'm looking at turnout.
Okay.
I think we should be watching Virginia and North Carolina. They're going to report early. And if her margins are big there in Virginia, if she comes close and exceeds expectations in North Carolina, she's going to have a good night, because it tells you the right people are voting and motivated.
Fantastic.
And I agree with everything Cornell said.
And I agree with Thank you. Fantastic conversation.
You only need one of us, obviously.
No, exactly what we all needed to hear on election night. Thank you all, Heidi, Cornell, Sarah, and Mark. And thank you for being here on Election Day. Up next, Vote Watch, how security officials are responding to election-related threats and misinformation, with democracy in action at tens of thousands of polling locations nationwide. Stay with us. You're watching a very special Election Day edition of Meet the Press Now. Welcome back. As we continue to report on the millions of Americans voting today, we are also following developments on efforts to ensure the election is secure. NBC News Justice and Intelligence correspondent Ken Delaney joins me now with more. Ken, great to have you here. So you're tracking the investigations into bomb threats in 3 different states. Apparently the Russians are behind this. What can you tell us?
That's right, Kristen. Big picture, it's been a pretty quiet day in terms of potential violence, but the FBI did say that non-credible bomb threats in 3 states have come from Russian email domains. That doesn't prove it was the Russians, but it suggests that this is part of the Russian effort to destabilize the election. And this comes on the heels of a warning this morning from the FBI about fake videos that they said were designed to keep people away from the polls. It said that there was a terror threat at polling places. It was a fake FBI video. They wanted to clear up that isn't happening. So we are awash in disinformation.
So clearly you'll be watching that throughout the night. The other thing that you're watching, the Justice Department waging a legal battle with some red states over election monitors. What can you tell us about that, Ken?
Missouri, Texas, and Florida, Republican officials in those red states wanted to keep the Justice Department out of their polling places. DOJ for decades sends lawyers to monitor civil rights and to make sure that things like the Americans with Disabilities Acts are being followed in the polling places. For whatever reason, these red states tried to stop that. In one case, a judge blocked that. But essentially, the Justice Department is saying, look, if you don't want us in your polling places, we'll stay outside and we'll talk to voters, but we're going to do our job, monitor whether federal laws are being followed.
All right. Ken Delaney, and thank you so much. I know we're all getting ready for a long night.
Indeed.
Thanks for being here.
Kristen.
Really appreciate it. All right. Well, this special Election Day edition of Meet the Press now wrapping up. Thank you for joining us. But we are just getting started. NBC News Now special coverage continues all night long. Hallie Jackson and Tom Yamas take over right now.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.